Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for the second workshop of the Polkadot Hackathon focused on Moonbeam. In the first one, we spoke about XCM and XC20s, and this one we're going to be focused on bridging. Now, these workshops are very and also very focused on the bounties themselves. So we're not talking about abstract concepts here. Instead, we're focused very specifically on the exact bounties. Oh, my camera is not working. Let me jump right back. Can everyone see me now?
I cannot.
Okay, let me, but you can hear my voice okay, right?
We can hear you perfectly, yeah.
Cool. That's okay. I'm going to be screen sharing most of the time, so if you can't see my face, that is just fine. Let me go ahead and get the screen share going. Okay, cool. So you should be able to see my screen. Bridging. We have a couple different things to focus on, but one is kind of building sort of what that looks like, how there can be a decentralized approach, and what a centralized approach looks like in comparison. We'll also speak about our bridge aggregator bounty. We'll kind of show the why of why this is needed, and some background and points of how to get started. We'll also look at a bridge transaction explorer bounty, which is our second bridge focused bounty. Again, we'll talk about kind of why that's needed and how that's important, and of course, where to get started. And finally, we'll wrap up with a look at the XCM bounties. And when I say XCM bounties, I just mean like last week, we talked about XC20s and things like that, but we didn't actually go through the bounties in specific detail. Last week's workshop, was very technical and focused on, the precompile and focused on Polkadot.js apps. So we do have a little bit more free time in terms of questions and going over the bounties. So I want to be sure to give you, plenty of chances to ask questions. So if you have any, go ahead and put them in the chat box on the side, or you could press ask a question, and I'd be more than happy to answer any that you have. So when we think about bridging, and when we think about building a bridging ecosystem, especially with regard to a new chain, such as Moonriver last year or Moonbeam, completing its launch in January, there are really two approaches to building a bridge, or building, kind of a bridging ecosystem. One is sort of a centralized, top-down approach where the ecosystem might say, this is the one bridge that everybody's going to use, and this is it. You either use it or you don't. And the other scenario is more of a decentralized approach, where the ecosystem, or where the protocol kind of takes a hands-off approach and doesn't specify which is the bridge that you should use. Given that Moonbeam is a decentralized and permissionless network, anybody can deploy a bridge to the Moonbeam or Moonriver networks. So we actually have a number of different bridges that have popped up. And when we think about the differences in terms of these two different approaches, personally, I think there are a number of benefits to the decentralized approach. And when you have a decentralized approach, that allows bridges to innovate and compete on features. So you can have different approaches, such as have maintain liquidity pools on both sides, and maybe potentially facilitate fast bridging or things like that, maybe for an additional fee. You could also allow users to choose the exact bridge experience that they would like. So while others may care more about fees, for example, they might take a bridge that has lower fees, but maybe takes an hour, to confirm the bridge transfer. And others might prefer, I'm okay with that has, maybe a little bit less decentralization, but it is faster, and I'm okay with paying a little bit of a higher fee. We'll talk specifically about all the different bridge options in the next slide or so. But one of the drawbacks of this decentralized approach is that it might be a little bit confusing to newcomers. There isn't one single URL to go to and say, okay, go to bridge.moonbeam.network or something like that. There is no single bridge, so this might be confusing to new users. But once a user has kind of landed in the ecosystem of Moonbeam, it's much easier to know. They'll figure out exactly which bridge that they want to use. So one thing that's enabled by a decentralized approach is a long tail of asset support. So different bridges support bridging to and from different networks. So that's part of the puzzle. But another part of the puzzle is that these bridges support different assets fundamentally. So some might support USDC, wrapped Ethereum, wrapped Bitcoin, that type of thing. But others might say, hey, I have some BUSD that I really want to bridge, from Binance Smart Chain. And so there's typically going to be, a bridge that supports that. So just, in comparison, a centralized bridge or a centralized, bridging ecosystem kind of is simpler, right? It's one place to go to. But this typically supports, fewer networks. It also has centrally planned, feature development and rollout of new features. And of course, it creates a single point of failure. So a decentralized bridge ecosystem, again, it has this complexity, but it is much more robust and resilient. And it also fits in a much more significant way with the ethos of decentralization. And so Moonbeam has taken the approach of a decentralized, bridging ecosystem. Now that enables, a number of different bounties, which we're looking for you to tackle, which will help to, improve the experience of evident user, who is approaching the Moonbeam and Moonriver ecosystems. So if anybody has any questions, just stop me and just let me know. So when you have this decentralized approach to bridging, not only do you have different bridges, but you also have different variants of wrapped assets. So that's because wrapped another network, and they also originate from a different bridge. So let's AnySwap. When they're launching their bridge, let's say from Ethereum to Moonbeam, they will handle the wrapping of the asset and the creation or minting of this new wrapped asset on Moonbeam. So, likewise, if another bridge provider, such as Nomad, is also launching a similar bridge, then Nomad has its own wrapped asset. And likewise with Meter Passport. So as you can understand, this can kind of be confusing, and we have different ways to identify these different types of wrapped assets. So USDT has a couple different ones, wrapped Bitcoin has a couple different ones, and depending upon what you want to do with your wrapped assets, whether you want to put it in StellaSwap or whether you want to put it into Moonwell, you might be looking for a different variety or a different flavor of this wrapped asset. Now, this is confusing at the point of bridging and at the moment where you're bridging over. But once you're in the Moonbeam ecosystem, it's very easy to swap over to another token if needed. So what I always suggest, or the advice that I always give, is that always start small and bridge over the token that you think you need. And if it's not quite the right token, then you can always make adjustments before you've maybe bridged over the full amount of funds that you were looking. Liquidity between these specific assets may not be large, so that's something to be aware of. But you could always bridge back to the origin chain if needed, or you could make an intermediary swap. So maybe instead of bridging from USDT Nomad to multichain or vice versa, you could possibly bridge to, or you could possibly swap to Glimmer first and then swap to the other asset. So I know this is a lot. And we will kind of look at the why we need a bridge aggregator. So I think that you've sort of gotten the idea, but the reason, or kind of the envision kind of the the project that we're envisioning is a place where users can go, a one link URL where they can go and they can specify, hey, I'd like to bridge USDC from Ethereum, and I'd like to bridge it to Moonbeam. So they could select, again, the origin network, the destination network, and then the specific asset that they'd like to bridge. And then this application could give them all the options that are compatible with the selections that they've just made. And that would be very, very powerful. So that's kind of the idea behind the bridge aggregator. We have $7,000 in prizes for this one, broken down into a first place and a second place prize. Now, the way this bounty is written is that you would be providing, a front end for, connecting users to these bridges. You don't have to tap into the API, and you don't have to provide like a 1-inch style, front end where you're the actual front end, for the bridge. You can instead just link them to the appropriate bridge. And many different bridges, allow you to do a permalink where you can embed, the origin network and the destination network, as well as the specific asset into the link, so that when they go to that link, it's pre-filled with all the information. That could be quite handy. And that's one approach that you could take. I don't want to stop you, certainly, from if you do want to build a 1-inch style, bridge aggregator where you actually are the front end and you do everything there. And the user doesn't even have to visit, the bridge page for that particular bridge. We're not going to stop you from doing that. And that would kind of be, the end goal. But it's certainly not a requirement for this. I will introduce the next bounty quickly as well, and then we'll take a look at the APIs and how you can get started on actually building these different bounties. Now, I just want to take a quick pause and give folks a chance to ask any questions that they have. Also, one thing I want to point out about this ecosystem cross-chain map is that it's missing Nomad, but Nomad and Connext are work closely together, and so most, if not all, the assets that work with Connext here will also be compatible with Nomad. So you can just think of Connext as both Connext and Nomad. And Connext has a couple of the fast bridging options, and Nomad, has more of the decentralized bridging options. But you can actually bridge both, from the same place. So you can use Nomad, and Nomad can potentially route you through Connext, and also, I believe, vice versa. So moving on to the next bridge bounty. The next one is to build a cross-chain bridge transaction explorer. And this also has $7,000 in prizes, split up between a first and a second place. So the idea behind this bounty is that when you're making a bridge transfer, you can see the status, of your transaction on the origin chain, but you don't know what's going on the destination chain. So I can see, that my transaction has been confirmed, but that only tells me, half the story. So if you were to build a cross-chain bridge transaction explorer that can tell you, whether the bridge transfer is successful, whether it's pending, and if it is, successful, then what is the hash of this transaction on the destination chain? Now, multichain provides, a very good example of what this bridge explorer might look like. So I'm going to briefly switch over to multichain here and show you what their bridge explorer looks like. So if we just click on, one of these, we should be able to see a bit more information. I'm just going to refresh the page because I think this is a bit stale. And we'll give it another refresh. Usually the transactions load up fairly quickly. Okay, so if we were to just look for a particular transaction and click on it, we should be able to see more details about it. There we go. Okay, so you can see things like the source hash. You can see the destination hash. You can also see the from address and the to address. Typically users might be sending to the same address, but it can be different. And if you click on the source hash, you'll see the transaction, on the origin chain, as well as the destination chain. You can see, the difference between the send and the receive value, and of course the status at the bottom. So that's kind of example, of what the UI could look like. We'll take a look at what we'd kind of work with in terms of APIs, like how we'd actually build this out. So multi-chain, is great, but that's just one, Explorer. Multi-chain, Explorer, does not help you out if you're bridging, with Connext or Nomad, or bridging with another option. And so the idea is that you'd be supporting, as many bridges as possible. You don't have to support them all, but if you could support, more than one, that would certainly be a great place to start. I want to introduce the Synapse API. So heading back to this page, we saw that Synapse was one of the bridge options among the many. And so today we're going to be looking specifically at Synapse and multi-chain. So we'll start with Synapse, and they have some great documentation here, as well as a demo where you can interact with this. Now I'm going to go ahead and just adjust my screen a little bit, and I'm going to increase the text size. So let me know if you have any issues seeing this screen share. I want to make sure that it's readable and legible for everybody. So the first API endpoint that we're looking at here is we're checking to see a bridge transaction status. And this requires two parameters. One is the to chain, the destination chain, and we're also looking for the from chain transaction hash. So I'm going to go ahead and send a sample request. And so I made a bridge transfer yesterday from Moonbeam to Moonriver. And so the to chain would be 1285. So the chain ID for Moonriver is 1285. For Moonbeam, it's 1284. And we also need the from chain transaction hash. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here. And I'll press send. And we can see that the transaction is complete. Now, if we were to change the parameters a little bit, just to make sure that this works, if we were to put in like an invalid string or something, let's try this, we should get an error or an is false message, actually. We would get an error if we put in an incorrect chain ID, for example. There we go. So there is some error checking here just to make sure that the request is valid. And then, if we were to make a bridge transfer, right now, and then immediately check, just 10 seconds later or something, then it would say, false, for is complete, because it's still in process. Now, there are a couple more methods that we can take a look at. One is to check, is a swap supported? So you can see what this type of request would look like. There are a couple different parameters that we need here. We need to have a from chain. You can put this, I guess, in hex or also in decimal. That's just fine. We also need a to chain. You need a from token and a to token. So you can also occasionally, switch to different tokens. For consistency here, we're going to be testing just, bridging the same token over from one to the other. We're going to submit a sample request though, and I'm going to go here to check if the swap is supported. And I have a couple parameters prepared here. So the example that I want to give here is, let's say we want to bridge from Moonbeam to Moonriver, and let's say we want to bridge wrapped mover. So in the from chain, I'm going to input 1284 to go from Moonbeam to Moonriver, and 1285 for the to chain. And for the from token, we're going to enter W mover, and the to token again is going to be W mover as well, which just stands for wrapped mover. We'll check to see if the swap is supported, and we can see that it is. Now, if we were to try a different type of asset, for example, let's say we wanted to bridge wrapped Ethereum, for example, from Moonbeam to Moonriver. We'll enter the symbol for wrapped Ethereum, and we'll send this request. And we can see here a response that token WETH is not supported on from network Moonbeam. So as you can see here, this would be a great API endpoint to use for your bridge aggregator to see where it's possible, to make a particular swap. This is just one of the endpoints though, and there is another one that I want to show you, which is quite useful. Instead of querying one at a time, like is this token supported? Is this token supported? We can actually get all these swappable tokens for a particular network. And let's actually try that next. So I'm going to click here on Get Swappable Tokens for Network. And all you need to do is enter a from chain, which is required here. It's a required parameter. And optionally, you can enter a to chain. So I highly recommend that you actually do put in the to chain as well, because otherwise you'll get a very long response that might be kind of tricky to sort through and decipher. So we have a sample success response here, and the response will look something like this. But let's go ahead and actually make a sample request, and then we can go through what the response looks like. So as an example, I want to bridge from Ethereum, which has a chain ID of 1, and I want to bridge to Moonbeam, which has a chain ID of 1284. We'll go ahead and send this request. And we can see a lot going on here. First, we can see the different token addresses for each of these supported networks. And we can also see the exact asset that can be swapped. So if we want to bridge from Ethereum to Moonbeam, we can see that we have the Synapse asset. We also have this Terra USD asset. We have Olympus DAO. We have, I believe, okay, that might be it for Ethereum to Moonbeam. But remember, this is just one bridge, right? If you're trying to bridge other assets, you might have to use a different bridge. And as another example, we can go 1284 to 1285 and see all of the swappable tokens from Moonbeam to Moonriver. And there should be a few more here, I believe. So we see Synapse, we see Terra USD, we see Olympus DAO Ohm, we also see Vested Solar Beam, we see Moonriver, and this symbol should really be W Mover, but for some reason here it's shown as Mover. So we see there are a couple different assets there. So that is quite helpful, and this is a good place to start. Again, this is just for one bridge. When you're looking at other bridges, the scenario might be a little bit different. So that was the Synapse API, and I also want to go through the multichain API. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So in order to do that, I'm going to open up a couple of different requests. So let me just share my screen. And we're going to switch to Postman. And let me know if you can see my screen. I think the text is quite small here, so let's see if we can zoom it in. Okay, so here we're looking at the multi-chain bridge, and we can get a couple different, let's see, let's start with just a simple request. So let's get information about the bridge for a particular chain. So here I input, or I put in the 124, so I put in the chain ID for Moonbeam, and we can see here a bit of information about the supported assets for this bridge. Now this is a lot of information, and actually I do want to also share there's a link to the multi-chain GitHub, which I'd like to open that up and share with everyone. I'll post a link actually. So this is the bridge API. You can see here that it says AnySwap. That's because multi-chain used to be known as AnySwap. And some of these methods are a bit outdated here, but you can see kind of what this provides. Okay, so let's look at one more interesting method. So we'd like to get the status of a bridge transfer. So it's a similar type of request, but the parameter that we're providing should be just a transaction hash, I believe. So let me take a look at the transaction hash. yeah, it's just a transaction hash. So if we make this request right here, we should get a status for how this is, how the transaction is doing, if it was successful or not. In this case, we can see that the transaction was successful. We can also see a transaction ID. Again, this is the same value that I provided here as a parameter. So it ends in D70F, with transaction ID here. We can also see the to address, which is quite helpful. And then you'll also see a value here called the swap transaction. Swap transaction, this is the destination transaction hash. So if you're building a cross-chain bridge explorer and you want to show the hash on the destination chain, this is one way that you could do it with any swap or multi-chain, is you can make this API request by providing the hash on the origin chain. And then in the response, you'll see the swap transaction value, which will show you the hash on the destination chain. Now, this value will only show up if the transaction is successful. So if it's pending, if it hasn't been confirmed yet, on the destination chain, then you'll actually be missing this swap transaction value. There's a bit more information down here, but we probably don't need to go into too much detail here about the additional information. You can see a number of confirmations, and that should be known as more of a minimum bound, because this transaction that I was demonstrating actually happened a little while ago. Certainly more than 32 transactions or 32 confirmations ago. So I would take this as a minimum bound, as in the number of confirmations that's needed before the transaction is considered complete. There's one more method that we could take a look at. We could look at get bridge history, and you can also provide a parameter here. I think this one was actually one that was not working for me. So that's why I was thinking that this one was, the documentation was just a little bit outdated. So we'll skip over the history one, but I'll switch back to the presentation real quick. So here we go. You should be able to see my screen in just a second. Okay, so for this history API method, you can see that we have getting the deposit and the withdrawal history. But again, this one was not quite working when I tested it out. So it's possible that this has changed a little bit. But that's kind of how you'd start to assemble the pieces, for putting together a bridge aggregator or putting together a cross-chain transaction explorer. You're not expected to support, every single bridge, and each bridge is going to have varying levels of support, with their API. Some might be, easier to use than others, and some might be more or less complete. So again, we're not expecting you to have everything, but to be able to have, more than one bridge integrated into your solution would be very, very good. I'm going to look for any questions, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the other bounties in detail. So one of the largest bounties that we have, and this is a co-sponsored bounty, so it's presented by both Moonbeam, Akala, Subquery, and Hydradex, has $20,000 total in prizes, and this is for an XCM Crosschain Explorer. So this is a little bit like the Bridge Transaction Explorer, but this is kind of taking it to another level. And the reason it's taking it to another level is because you have to integrate information from both the EVM side of things as well as the substrate side of things. And Subquery actually supports indexing for both. So that's why Subquery is such an integral part of this challenge. You don't have to use Subquery in your solution, but it certainly might be a great place to start and consider, looking into. The problem, that we have for this, I may have, explained it a little bit in the last workshop, but the sample that I gave was actually, I did make a full transfer, and I demonstrated what happens, when you're making a transfer. Let's say you're transferring an ERC, or let's say you're transferring in XC20, from Moonbeam to Akala, for example, you can see that transfer in the EVM on Moonbeam. You can see this XC20. Actually, you can only associated with the X tokens palette. So you can't see which XC20 is being transferred. You can't see the amount, and you can't see where it's going. So you're missing a lot of information there. The second part of that is that if you're looking for your transaction on the destination chain, so if you're looking on the substrate side of Akala, you can see your balance actually increase, but you won't be able to see a transaction that indicates where it came from or the amount. All you can see is just that your balance increased. So this is kind of a disjointed, experience, and it's absolutely, not optimal at this time. And so what we're looking for is a solution, that indexes both the Ethereum and the substrate side of things, and can match together essentially these disparate type of events, and clearly display information such as this is the XC20 asset that you're transferring, this is the amount, this is where it's going, and then what is the status of that transfer? Was it successful? How much was taken out in fees, etc., etc. So it is a difficult challenge, and that's why the prize amount is so high. So moving on to the next bounty. This one, is a Moonbeam sponsored one in its entirety, and that's to build an XCM related tool. We have $7,000 in prizes for this one, split across a first and a second place. The challenge specifically is to build any sort of application that provides useful data or analytics around XC20 assets. So anything that really enhances the end user experience. And for a couple of sample projects, we have some ideas listed here, such as an XC20 token tracker. You could build a TVL tracker. And another throughout the .sama ecosystem, this could be very, very useful. Yeah.
Can you repeat the last part? We lost you for a second.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, of course. So for the sample projects, we're thinking of a cross-chain asset locator. And this could be very useful for all of .sama. So as an example, right, you could have assets that are, you could have basically like a heat map or something like that, which shows, the location of these different, cross-chain assets. So as an example, you could say something like 90%, of all KSM or 95% of KSM is currently on the relay chain. And you could break it down further and say how much is in staking and how much is not. You could say X% is on Moon River, X%, is on other parachains, and kind of figure out where these different assets are. So that could be very useful. We also, you could build a statistics or an analytics application. And so there's a lot that you could do here. And it is kind of, specifically focused on analytics, but you could also build a something like a front end or some sort of tool that just enhances the user experience. So it doesn't have to be sort of like a analytics page that's kind of like solely focused on just showing like after the fact information or anything like that. Yeah, so those are our XCM focused bounties, and we have plenty of time for Q&A. So I want to be sure that we have just open it up, for Q&A, and I can address anything else further. Probably know about all these links already, but I'm going to share the Polkadot Hackathon guide here. So this is the Notion site, which has all of the bounties in great detail. That's right, Alex. We're very excited about the XCM Bounty, the combined challenge. Should be quite good. Also, another thing I'll shout out, I'll be at the Polkadot Hacker House in New York City starting on June 23rd. So that is coming up very, very soon, just over a week away. That'll be a full week of workshops, hands-on learning and office hours, also networking, great place to meet some potential teammates, and maybe you build something that goes beyond the hackathon. Maybe you launch something into a full-blown project after this, which would be quite exciting. So I'll have a workshop there on Saturday. That'll be in person, and I'm very excited to meet some teams there. But of course, the Hacker House is just one element of it. Most of the Polkadot Hackathon is taking place virtually. This also coincides with Polkadot Decoded, which is taking place in New York 2 days after the 2 days after the Hacker House wraps up. So that's definitely something you could consider if you're in New York. Yeah, let me know if anyone has any questions. And another thing I'll just point out is that we do have office hours taking place virtually every Monday. So that is between 10 a.m. and noon PST. So if I do the conversion, that would be 1 p.m. To 3 p.m. Eastern time. And that's every Monday. And it takes place through the Gather Town. And you can book at like a specific time to make sure that you have that time reserved. But you can also just pop in there, or you can pop in our Discord, and we are more than happy, to provide support at any time. Discord is actually the fastest way to get help. So I want to thank you all for joining this morning, and we can wrap it up in the next minute or so if everyone is all set on questions. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for joining. Carlos, Morella, Sankara, Alex, Chirag. We're very excited to have you all. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon or evening, wherever you are, or morning if you're on Pacific time. I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thank you so much for joining us all today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.